Mr. Chairman. The prayers are to be led by the Chairman's Chaplain, Reverend Bryony Wood. Thank you, Bryony.
I wonder whether you, like me, have had to battle through lots of water this morning, recognising that this is not easy for us and for many who are really badly affected. And then also, as I walked in, going through a bit of a flood of beef stew, which was really, obviously, really bad news for whoever's just spilled that. So I wonder whether just instead of words, I will finish with a prayer, but just instead of words, let's just breathe out all the frustrations, the busyness, the whatever it is that gets us to this point, and then just breathe in some of that peace and just pause before we begin the meeting. We are also remembering today 3 people who have recently died, and we will have a minute's silence. But remembering the former Democratic Services officer, Martin Gately, who died in January, former County Councillor Barry Cooper, who passed away on the 12th of February, and former County Councillor John Hempsall, who died on Wednesday. So let's pause as we remember them and their families. Lord God, who creates all, holds all, and loves all, we come before you to thank you for the freedoms we enjoy and the peace in which we live. Keep us mindful of the privileges we share as we work together for the benefit of our community. We ask for your wisdom and grace as we meet and work, discuss and debate. Help us to listen to you and to each other. Give us discernment, courage and compassion as we make decisions that shape the lives of those who live and work in Nottinghamshire. We pray that our county continues to be a place where all people can thrive. Amen.
Item 1. The minutes have been circulated. Is it your wish we sign the minutes to true and correct record? All those in favour? Thank you. Are there any apologies for absence? Councillor Barnfather.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I have apologies from Councillor Dr. John Doddy, medical illness, from Councillor Sinead Anderson, medical illness, and I've been asked to relay the apologies from Councillor Steve Garner, likewise medical illness. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Henry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have no apologies from our group this morning. Thank you.
Councillor Deakin.
Thank you, Chair. I've got apologies from Councillor David Shaw for the reasons.
Thank you. Councillor Deakin. Declarations of interest. If any councillor or officer has an interest in any matter on the agenda, you should declare it now. Please raise your hand now if you have any interest to declare, When called to speak, you should state what type of interest it is and give brief details. None? Thank you. Chairman's business. We call upon Councillor Tracy Taylor. Can I ask you to introduce the award, please, Tracy?
Thank you, Chairman. It's my absolute pleasure to be celebrating this award this morning, and particularly to recognise the staff in the fostering team. County Council was awarded in 2 categories, Best Collaboration and Best Creative, by the Comms to Point to Uni Awards, in recognition of our involvement in a collaborative fostering film, Any of Us. It's a powerful film intended to attract more carers to fostering. These awards are about recognising genuine creativity, innovation and brilliant results in public sector communications. Nottinghamshire County Council was one of more than 80 local authorities and children's trusts supporting the Any of Us project, which showcases fostering and how anyone can become a foster carer. The film was launched in September 2023 as part of an ongoing drive to attract more people to become foster carers with their local authority, and I'm really proud to be sharing this award at full council here today. Thank you, Chairman.
This is wonderful news, and I'm very pleased to hear about the success of the project and how it supports the council's important work around recruiting foster carers to ensure that every local child can grow up in a safe, loving environment. And I would like to invite Jenny Whiston, along with you, Councillor Taylor, to come up to the dais. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon.
Thank you. We have received sad news of the deaths of former county councillors Barry Cooper and John Hemsel. Barry Cooper represented the West Bridgford Central and South Division from 2005 to 2013 and was Vice Chairman of the Council in his final year of office. John Hemsel represented the Tuxford Division from 1985 to 2013 and was the Vice Chairman of the Environment Committee in the 2012-2013 municipal year. I knew John Hemsel very well, and he died yesterday morning. John represented the Tuxford Division of the County Council before myself. I first remembered John when I was about 12 and I went to pick strawberries, and we were paid on the way to the fruit. John was doing the weighing and the paying. John followed his father into farming on the fruit farm in East Markham, where they lived all their lives. His father, Cecil Hemsel, also represented the Tuxford Division on the County Council before him. John had an orchard of historic apple varieties, and it could have been 100, I can't remember how many varieties he got, which he planted and continued to manage himself. These were the core of the East Markham Apple Day celebration in conjunction with the East Markham community, and I thank John and his wife Helen for all the help that they gave to me. I now invite members to say a few words about those we have lost. Councillor Fielding.
Thank you, Chairman. I also recall John Hemsel and his heritage orchards. I mean, he was absolutely renowned on his knowledge of the heritage of apples and pears within this county. I served on the planning committee with him and can recall site meetings with both him and former councillor Bullivant at West Burton, going across a field that was absolutely like a rabbit warren, but as I say, they were extremely knowledgeable. He served his community well, and he also served on the Fire Authority, of which I served at the time. So as I say, condolences to his family.
I now call upon Councillor Sue Saddington.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, firstly, I'd like to comment on Barry, and I have to say it's a little bit worrying. As I was getting ready to come this morning, I thought, my goodness, I know all those three people and have been at County Hall with Barry and with John Hempsall. So it seems to be coming a little bit close to home, I think. However, Barry to me was a charming gentleman. He was somebody I would label as steady as you go, and he was certainly a great friend in this chamber. Now, John Hempsall, I happen to know the family extremely well, and I've seen his niece, strangely enough, this morning. But the one thing I can remember about John Hempsall was at a certain time of the year, he came with a massive box into our group and said, help yourself to our apples. There was every possible apple there that you could take home and either make an apple crumble or an apple pie or whatever you chose to do. But he was the most generous of men, brought in his apples, and there we helped ourselves. So when I read that email last night, the first thing that clicked to my mind was his apples, because that's as I shall remember him. But I'd like to move on to Martin Gately a little bit. At the start of this administration, I was asked to chair the Health Scrutiny Committee, a position for which I had a great passion. With Matt Barney as my vice chairman, it was no secret he and I worked together and formed a great friendship. There was a third person, Martin Gately, for whom we had a great respect. When Matt and I heard he was ill, we were saddened and shocked. I received regular updates, but it soon became clear that he was seriously ill, which resulted in his recent passing. Matt and I attended the celebration and memorial for Martin in early February. Music and readings were played and read, which showed his love for his family and his life. Although Matt and I thought we knew Martin, a truly excellent, knowledgeable, trusted officer, we clearly didn't know several things which were a huge part of his life. He had a lifelong passion which began at the age of 7 when his mum bought him a comic, The Adventures of Superman. He became the encyclopedia of comic writers and artists. Martin wrote many short stories which were published in both English and translated into French, and a new book was published just prior to his death. For 50 years, Martin sought out and owned a world-class collection of comic books and original comic strip art. His life revolved around Superman, Star Trek, and Star Wars. So we listened to music from Superman, Bridge Over Troubled Water, Journey of the Sorcerer from the Eagles, Star Trek. We left sad but uplifted, having learnt what a wonderful husband and father Martin was. I spoke to his wife, who was so pleased that I had attended, and she'd heard of Matt and myself repeatedly from Martin. I told her it had been an absolute privilege to work with Martin. Both his loving family and Nottinghamshire County Council have lost a true genius. With a hug, kiss, and tear with his wife, daughter, and son, I left thankful for having known him.
Thank you, Councillor Saddington. Councillor Fall.
Thank you, Chairman. First, our condolences from the Labour Group for both John Hempsall and Barry Cooper. It's always sad to lose a real servant like those two, and so we're very sad to hear of his passing. Again, I think I'm really glad that Martin Gately's name has been included in that, and I won't go into any further detail that Sue's provided us so eloquently, but I too was chair of Health Scrutiny in 2013, kind of thrown into it a little bit into deep water, and he was amazing. His knowledge, his experience, his kindness and support were absolutely spot on, and I don't know what I've done without him. He was just kind of a lovely man and a very clever one too. And as Sue just described, the richness of his life in terms of his writing and his creativity and his friendships came across so well in the celebration. That celebration, I think we all came away uplifted and, as you say, really glad to have known him. So our condolences to Martin's family and friends. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fall. Call upon Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to speak about Barry Cooper, Chairman. Barry was born in April 1936. In other words, in a couple of months' time, he would have been 88. Barry was married to Jean since 1958. You heard correctly, 1958. I met Jean last night and told her I would be speaking today about Barry at full council. As a family, we have known Barry and Jean for over 30 years, as we were lucky enough to live in the same road as both of them. Sadly, in recent years, Jean's health has not been that great, and this put a stop to their enjoyment of cruises. And I'm sure those who take cruises will know what that means. Jean told me Barry passed away very unexpectedly. Having spoken to her last night, she is in a state of shock. She will need a lot of family support and, of course, friendship, which she'll get. Barry represented West Bridgford, Central and South, as the Chairman alluded to earlier on, the two-member division with Mike Cox. He was Deputy Chairman of this council, as you said earlier on, Mr. Chairman, but sadly, because politics is sometimes a brutal business, he never did become Chairman. Barry was considered to lead the fire authority. It was an absolute pleasure to work alongside him to obtain tenders at West Bridgford Fire Station. I'm sure that sounds very familiar to you, Jonathan. Barry was Nottingham through and through, a truly local lad who, until his retirement, was in the printing business. He will be sadly missed by so many. Mr. Chairman, thank you for allowing me to remember this man so fondly today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. Councillor Lawton.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. Just a few words about John. John was here when I first became a councillor, and I remember when he was standing for chairman, because his father actually stood for chairman and then died very closely afterwards. And he turned around to me and said, "I'm not 100% sure whether I should be chairman of this council." He was pontificating on whether he should be chairman of the council. I said, "Don't be so stupid. You'll be okay." And he was an excellent chairman. I remember back in 2004 when I set up or helped set up with Roger Merriweather the Bramley Apple Day in Southall, and John literally was the first person to volunteer, and he used to come along into the nave in Southall Minster, and with all his apples, and all the varieties of apples that John was talking about, and helped literally for nearly 10-12 years. We had Phil Vickery, if you remember, from Ready Steady Cook, coming along doing cooking presentations with John's apples. It just happens to be a friend of mine. So he used to help. Really good day. I mean, the other interesting thing, but literally very recently, I was going from North Muscombe to Sutton-on-Trent. They got an issue in Sutton-on-Trent, and so I was going down the A1, and I stopped off at the BP garage, and I parked my car up and ready for filling up the fuel. And right next door to me was a massive, great old Elvis with really massive headlights, and the guy had obviously filled it up, and it cost him a fortune. Must have done. He'd been to a classic car rally down in Stamford, and he was parked up in the petrol station, and off he went to pay his dues. And I just filled my car up, and the window was, the back window was down, and there was a lady in the back door, the back window in the back, and I said, "Oh, where do you come from?" As you know, talk to anybody. And she said, "Oh, I come from East Markham." I said, "Oh," I said, "John Hempsall's area. What a fantastic county councillor he was." It came straight out from this lady in the back of this vintage car, and so that just goes to show you a measure of the man. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Lawton. Councillor Girling.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I knew all of them really. In terms of the councillors, I didn't know them particularly well, but my memories of them is they was all very passionate about what they did, and they served their communities well. What I do remember about Ken, however, is the size of his eyebrows. They was absolutely massive, weren't they? The big feature of him. He also had a bit of a naughty sense of humour as well, because I know when I stood for Parliament back in 2010 at Bassetlaw, he helped me quite a considerable amount. So a really great guy, and it's very sad to hear of their passing. I really stand up though to talk about Martin Gately. I was the chairman of the Health Scrutiny for 4 years with Martin as my right hand man really, and it's been referred to about his knowledge about Health Scrutiny, which was second to none. But it wasn't just about his knowledge; it was about the way he communicated with the health area, that the people within health, the hospitals and the doctors and everybody to do with health, how he managed to get them to do what he wanted them to do, which was great, because as a health scrutiny chairman, it really made your job a lot easier. And he had quite a good sense of humour as well, so he always sort of brightened things up. And I when I heard about his illness, I've called him up a few times over that time of his illness, and towards the end when I was speaking to him, and the end was quite close really, and he was still positive. He still had that sense of humour. He still sort of saw the brightness in people and everything. And it's a testament to his character that he, even towards the end, when he knew that he was coming to the end of his time, he still kept true to himself, and he wasn't sat there in pity. He was sat there in celebration of what he's done and what he's achieved in his life. And I think that's a really good thing to remember about him. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Girling. Councillor Zadrosny.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of words on behalf of the independent group to add our condolences to the friends and family of those we're talking about. I knew John reasonably well from the first couple of years when I was a county councillor, but Barry actually was one I was particularly close to in the term of 2009 to 13. Which was when the Conservatives first sort of gained back control for that term. The Conservatives, I think Gordon might remember this, the Conservatives and we Liberal Democrats at the time almost ran a joint group at the Fire Authority. We were pretty close. And Barry actually was a wily old fox. He was really clever. He was very good, and there was some real times when he and I, if it hadn't have been for the rogue Conservative from the City Council. He would have been chairman of the Fire Authority. And there were a couple of times we had motions of no confidence, and we very nearly did it. It was just by a casting vote of the sitting chairman that Barry didn't end up as the chair of the Fire Authority. And we had lots of meetings over there trying to get him through. But I always found him honest, diligent, truthful, and incredibly funny, actually. He didn't always show that in this chamber, but when we worked with him on projects at the Fire Authority, he was really careful and considered. Him and Ken Rigby at the time were thick as thieves, working out the detail of what they were doing, and I think this chamber is certainly a lot sadder and poorer for not having good characters like Barry and John as well in this chamber. So, Mr. Chairman, sincere condolences to the friends and family of John, Martin and Barry from our group. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zadrozny. Councillor Jonathan Wheeler.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So I served with Barry as joint ward councillor in Gampston some 10 years ago. I first came on the Borough Council, and obviously he represented the geographical area I cover now. I think Councillor Jostley touched on a bit about Barry. He was not the one to shout and scream a lot with Barry. He was a very considered person, much into the detail. I mean, his filing system at home is something that Councillor Barnpart would envy, because it was just literally files everywhere, and he was very meticulous, keeping all the papers and going through them on a regular basis. But with Barry, he generally cared. You know, with the issues were, he would keep him up at night thinking about them, and really trying to his hardest to help residents to be at lots of different meetings. I mean, he chaired West British Local Area Forum, a voluntary role, and went to as many committees as he could, just because he really wanted to help the community. So, and obviously I knew Barry personally as well. Obviously grew up on the road with him as well, and you know, he's all about the health community. You know, he loved walking his dogs even to the very end. If you saw walk around the balancing pond with his little dog, you know, and it really was a passion for him. So, yeah, with Barry, like I say, I think it's a real loss to us, as people have always said already, and obviously as well as chairman of the Health Screening Committee now, I also want to pay my respect to Martin, because you know, it's still very much clear now the work he did. I know that the current officers now really appreciate the work he did at the time and learning from him on there. So very much be able to do it to him and his family as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. Councillor Adair.
Thank you, Chairman. Talk about Barry Cooper. Barry and I entered politics at the same time. We won our first seats at the district council on the same time, and we won our first seats here at the same time. And we worked together for a number of years. Barry was mayor of Rushcliffe, which he was very passionate about, and he was always out in the community doing all the right things and being there. And him and Jean were always somewhere. And Alice and I, when we would go to these things, they would always be with Barry and Jean, and to make sure. And also, I think we should recognise his son Ian and the family as well. You know, he's lost his father, and we knew them also very, very well. So there's lots of other good things have been said, and I'm not going to repeat them. But Barry, at district level and at county level, lived through, and it was sad at the time when, as you said, he was deputy chair here, waiting to be in the chair, and fortunately politics got in the way, and that never happened for him. And that did sadden Barry, and I know it did at the time. But that's life in that direction. And John Hempsel I knew well also, because he was here when I've been here for a number of years. And I used to call him Apple John. Where's my apples, John? And that's what he used to get. And can I just offer condolences to both the families?
Thank you, Councillor Adair. Councillor Carr.
Thank you. I was going to spend a while talking about Martin, who will be sadly missed, a lovely man. But I have to say, I think I'll leave it at what Sue Saddington said, because she said it with such passion and sincerity that I don't think I need to say any more. Thank you, Sue.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. I have no more speakers. If nobody else wishes to speak on the subject, I'll move on. Thank you. Lord Lieutenant Sir John Peace, there's a special service being held this afternoon to highlight and celebrate the work of Lord Lieutenant Sir John Peace. Unfortunately, as we're all here today, we are not able to attend. So on behalf of everyone in the chamber, I would like to offer our well wishes to Sir John and take this opportunity to thank him for his dedication to the role. Chairman's business. On the 17th of January, the Chairman visited Nottingham Brain Injury Unit at Snowdale Hucknall. In the evening was the Westfield Folkhouse Pantomime, Sleeping Beauty at the Mansfield Palace Theatre, an amazing, professional and hilarious production. The King's Honours Award took place in County Hall on Friday the 19th of January. Guests included OBEs, MBEs, BEMs and awards for enterprise and voluntary service. The awards went to people who had contributed in the voluntary sector, local government, education, healthcare, business, policing and the arts. The Lord Lieutenant Sir John Peace attended, as did the Lord Mayor of Nottingham, several Deputy Lieutenants including Mick Burrows, and the High Sheriff of Nottinghamshire, Veronica Pickering, attended. On the 22nd of January, I attended and was entertained at the Ram Mandar celebrations in the city. The evening finished with a spectacular fireworks display. On the 1st of February, we hosted Hayman Primary School here at County Hall. On the 10th of February, I attended the International Community Centre to celebrate the Chinese New Year, and the New Year is the year of the dragon. We tried calligraphy, learnt a lot about Chinese culture and enjoyed watching a demonstration of Tai Chi. On the 6th of February, Her Royal Highness Princess Anne visited Plumtree Hall as patron of the Royal College of Occupational Therapists. Nottingham West Primary Care Network showcased the work of mental health occupational therapists offering first contact care from GP surgeries. I attended and was introduced to Her Royal Highness by Sir John Peace. Also introduced was High Sheriff of Nottinghamshire, Veronica Pickering. Subsequently, we spoke to the practicing mental health occupational therapists. An interesting experience. Well, there will be a draw today. Many of you have already contributed and bought tickets to the draw. Tickets are available on sale just outside the chamber as usual. Thank you to Gillian and Wendy for their help to make this possible. Proceeds to the Chairman's charity. I thank Gordon Wheeler for contributing a prize to the draw. Thank you, Gordon. On the 9th of April, Sylvia Brown, wife of Andrew Brown, will do a sponsored parachute jump at Langer Airfield. If you sponsor her, proceeds will go to the Chairman's charity. Please support this brave lady and sign up. There will be a quiz night at the end of March. Staff, councillors, families, all welcome. Details like the parachute jump, or to follow, will be circulated and will be publicised properly. Thank you very much. May I remind members of the procedure for budget meetings, that under the regulations passed by the government in February 2014, there must be a recorded vote on any budget amendment and the final budget motion. As such, there will not be a separate show of hands vote, only the recorded vote for any amendment and the final motion. May I also remind members that the end time limit for this meeting is 5:30 p.m. The meeting will only continue beyond this if necessary and not beyond 8 p.m. Lunch will be taken at approximately 12:30 p.m. As set out in the Constitution from the annual budget meeting, there will be a single debate on the motion and any amendments. I would remind you that the mover of the motion has a 30-minute time limit when moving the motion and a 15-minute time limit when replying to the debate. The mover of the amendment has a 20-minute time limit when moving their amendment and a 10-minute time limit when replying to the debate. All of the speakers have a 10-minute time limit. Once the motion has been moved and seconded, I will ask the Independent Alliance Group to move their amendment. Once the budget proposals and amendment have been moved and seconded, I will open the single debate on the motion and amendment. The Chairman calls Councillor Richard Jackson. Councillor Creamer, have you something you need to say?
Just getting in early after this moves.
Right, thank you very much, Councillor Creamer. The Chairman calls on Councillor Richard Jackson.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Chairman. 3 weeks ago, a report by Parliament's Levelling Up Housing and Communities Committee pointed to a national £4 billion gap in local government funding. We've read about councils going bankrupt, or as bankrupt as it's possible to go when your failures will be bailed out by yet more taxpayers' money. The reasons for these huge debts or total collapses of these councils vary, but they include acting like maverick property entrepreneurs at the public's expense, operating in competitive commercial trading environments like energy without the necessary expertise, failing to address the equal pay claims early enough, and failing to check whether previously agreed savings were being delivered or had even ever been deliverable. What seems consistent, Chairman, is that the leadership failures of these councils did not happen overnight. Bad financial cultures went under the radar until unexpected events like COVID or the conflict in Ukraine triggered global financial shocks that called the bluff of these councils and exposed their mistakes for all to see. What struck me, Chairman, is that most of these authorities issuing 114 notices and many others reporting huge budget gaps have been better funded by central government over the past 2 or 3 decades than Nottinghamshire County Council. Nottinghamshire hasn't received any special financial treatment over the years, and in fact, we've received very unspecial treatment. We balanced our books despite being a shire county with comparatively low funding from central government, and despite our location in the historically underfunded East Midlands. That's beginning to change now, of course. The East Midlands devolution deal that this council signed off last December will bring more than £4 billion of funding into this region in the future. But the county council has faced and still faces growing financial pressure driven by demographics and global events that we cannot control. The difference between this council and those failing councils is that we've taken proactive and sometimes difficult decisions under conservative control, that we protected our services and given us the resilience to absorb these global shocks. Thanks to year-round budget monitoring and development, this council always has a plan for the best and the worst case financial scenario that we could face each year, even before we know exactly what funding may or may not arrive from central government. Last September, when I launched our budget consultation, Rising to the Challenge, I was already able to inform the public that the authority faced a budget shortfall of £30.8 million across the duration of our MTFS to 2027. My financial monitoring report at the same time showed that we faced around £17 million of significant pressures, which were led by expensive independent children's care placements, high demand on long-term care, direct payments and predicted needs, losses on schools catering due to food cost and salary inflation, overspends on home-to-school transport based on a predicted increase in the number of pupils travelling and the distances that they seek to travel, big overspends on SEND transport due to contract pressures arising from wage and fuel increases, and a growth in SEND pupil numbers resulting from demand for education, health and care plans, and the number of medical needs that are now included in those assessments. For full disclosure, Chairman, my report last September also predicted a significant underspend of £15.8 million against central items, offsetting most of those pressures, leaving a smaller spend of £1.7 million. In the context of a £591 million revenue budget, being 1.7 million or a third of a percent over planned expenditure is practically on target, but that impression is deceptive, and it's important that I explain why. Behind the central items heading are tranches of money which, though helpful in temporarily offsetting cost pressures on our service budgets, cannot be assumed to continue into the future. combined with other efficiencies and mitigations agreed in recent months, the surplus in central items means that today we are underspending against our 2023-2024 budget by £5.5 million. But nobody should kid themselves or kid others that this negates the financial challenges that we still face. The true picture is revealed by the overspends being reported on our service budgets, which amount to some 10.9 million in total as things stand today. Unlike what could be described as the Brucey bonus boosting our central items budget, the causes of many of the pressures on our service budgets are likely to be permanent unless we stick to our plan to take proactive action to address them. By November of last year, the estimated cumulative cost of these and other ongoing pressures had risen to some 60 million and over the medium term. But our Section 151 officer said at that time that we remain a very long way from bankruptcy because we consistently and constantly track these pressures and take in-year action to mitigate them. There were ridiculous attempts at the time to imply similarities between our budget gap and Nottingham City Council's bankruptcy. To be clear, Chairman, Nottingham City Council's budget gap over the medium term is 171.7 million, almost 5 times greater than ours, which now stands at 36. There is comparison to be made, but that comparison is between a well-run council here and a badly run one across the water. Unlike Conservative-controlled Nottinghamshire, Labour-controlled Nottingham had neither a plan to cover their 38 million losses on Robin Hood Energy, nor enough in reserves, having unlawfully used revenue funds to artificially prop up their reserves. In December, perhaps to distract from the failure of Labour colleagues in the city, Councillor Kramer, on behalf of the County Labour Group, lodged a motion asking the council to write to government demanding more money. The motion was timed down, Mr. Chairman, but it read to me like Labour's annual attempt to get their excuses in early for not presenting an alternative budget yet again today. In recent years, Labour members have consistently refused to present alternative budgets, hiding behind claims that this council's financial challenges are all the government's fault and must all be solved by more government money, as if that cash doesn't also come from the taxpayer. If that's Labour's plan again this year, then they should think twice, because even their own party leader isn't peddling Jeremy Corbyn's more money for everything line anymore, or at least he isn't today. So Keir Starmer, when he's not busy praising Margaret Thatcher, has stated that the local government, and I quote, won't turn on the spending taps. So, Chairman, I wonder what Councillor Kramer's motion was really seeking to achieve. If his point is that central government must do more to support and to fund councils to deliver specific responsibilities placed on us at a national level, then we agree. And in fact, I'll be citing some examples today. However, if Councillor Kramer's motion was just Labour's excuse to sidestep setting out any proactive savings or modernisation ideas for this council themselves, then they've regressed to what previous Labour members used to do here before 2009. As Sir Keir Starmer has said himself, magic money tree economics don't work. That's why he dropped Labour's £28 billion green investment pledge 2 weeks ago. But this Conservative administration keeps the council's own house in order and lobbies for more money from central government, where we believe that it's justified. And thanks to our council leader, we've achieved great success in that lobbying. The devolution deal is well documented, and just last month government announced an extra £600 million for councils to help with social care pressures. Ben Bradley, standing up for Nottinghamshire as usual, was hugely influential in securing that money. As both council leader and MP for Mansfield, Ben not only understands the challenges facing local government, but is in a unique position to communicate this message personally and directly to ministers. Ben spearheaded the County Council Network's campaign calling for an emergency injection of council funds. He was lead signatory on a letter to this effect from the county all-party parliamentary group to Rishi Sunak and Michael Gove, and Ben's message was heard. Government has listened. The £600 million in new cash comes with a condition: that councils produce productivity plans explaining how we'll improve service performance and reduce wasteful expenditure. And that's absolutely fine with us. It's what we do all the time. The criteria set out by Michael Gove 2 weeks ago align very accurately with what we've already been doing and what we plan to do in the future. Our share of this cash is a further £7.3 million, a good chunk of money which will help to mitigate the £25.1 million pressures on our children and families budget, But obviously, it doesn't make all of our challenges go away. The government's own figures show that children's social care spending by local authorities has doubled over the past decade. The way to view this extra 7.3 million is that it buys our council time, buys us breathing room to develop and to implement more of our sustainable solutions. And yes, some of these solutions themselves require government intervention, not in terms of money, but rather in terms of policy or law change, and I will expand on that later on. It was clear from record responses to our budget consultation, Chairman, that the Nottinghamshire public are realists. They appreciate that many of the answers to the future sustainability of the County Council must come from within this authority. The survey included an opportunity for respondents to give suggestions in their own words on how this council could save money or raise additional revenue, and 48% of the 3,911 respondents exercised this option. 14 themes were extrapolated from those suggestions, and these include ensuring services operate efficiently, getting things done right the first time, increasing income by lobbying central government, increasing council tax, encouraging business sponsorship, holding more paid events, charging appropriately for services, and increasing enforcement penalties, selling or renting out underused NCC buildings, examining whether our services can best be delivered in-house or externally, and reviewing external contracts and purchasing to maximise value, moving more towards prevention and early intervention in areas like adults, children, social care and highway maintenance, ensuring that the energy efficiency and recycling is maximised, including reducing heating and lighting in our own buildings, encouraging more community involvement and volunteering in our services, and making more use of new technology like AI, as artificial intelligence, not Ashfield independence, to increase efficiency and to cut costs. Chairman, I agree with every one of those public suggestions, and in fact many of them describe measures that we are already taking and have taken over recent years. This feedback is not just an endorsement of our approach, but an encouragement to go further. Working with senior officers, Cabinet members never stop pursuing ways to deliver services in more efficient and joined-up ways, targeting provision effectively. We have an annual delivery plan measuring how we are performing against the ambitions in our strategic plan, Healthy, Prosperous, Green. This time last year, we agreed a programme of demand management, cost reduction and savings to release over £9 million in total by 2026, including £3.3 million this year, as well as continuing to deliver on efficiencies agreed in previous years. I've spoken before about whole family safeguarding, Chairman, and we're investing heavily in measures to intervene as early as possible to help vulnerable children and families from a troubled start, or ideally before a troubled start. We work with parents and children to give them the tools they need to enjoy happier, healthier, more independent lives. A great outcome for them and a great outcome for the council, because families empowered by these targeted interventions are less likely to require intensive and expensive long-term care and health support in the future. Our early help project, for example, is supporting some 1,400 people, some 1,400 at-risk families this year, up from 880 last year. And next year we aim to reach more than 1,700 families. Our targeted interventions have played a key part in reducing the number of young people entering care, and the overall number of children that we look after is now stable, when a few years ago that number was rising rapidly. This is fantastic progress, but we face obstacles too. Due to national shortage, councils across the country are struggling to recruit foster carers for our looked after children. This obliges us to purchase placements from private care providers, some of whom are not only exploiting the national shortage by charging extortionate fees for external foster and residential care placements, but are also manipulating the market by gazumping councils' own attempts to recruit foster carers and by poaching those who we've already trained at public expense. Chairman, when a hard-nosed free market conservative like Councillor Philip Owen calls this the dirty face of capitalism, he did, and demands state intervention to prevent such profiteering, then you know it's a genuine problem. Nottinghamshire County Council will always ensure our looked after children are safe and protected, but the current situation leaves us spending more than we can afford to spend on expensive external foster and residential care placements, and amounts to a forecast £11 million of budget pressure over the medium term. Whether this requires a legally binding cap on what the independent sector can charge or other solutions, the government needs to act, and to act now, to protect vulnerable young people and the taxpayer, because the current situation is unsustainable. Likewise, the government's commendable commitment to high expectations for children and school pupils with special educational needs and disabilities has seen the cost of those high expectations land on councils like ours. Demand for education, health and care plans and the number of medical needs now included in those assessments are generating a big growth in SEND pupil numbers, with a concurrent expectation from parents that councils must bear the cost of transporting their children, sometimes at great distances and great expense, to preferred SEND schools. Councils throughout the country are struggling to cope with the current demand. In our case, this constitutes £900,000 budget pressure from EHCPs and £11 million budget pressure on SEND transport over the medium term. Government either needs to be more realistic with parents about the level of support that they should expect, or preferably provide councils with the level of resources that we need to meet those expectations. Regarding adult social care, successive governments of all political persuasions have failed to put forward, or at least get agreement to, a sustainable long-term social care funding solution. Boris Johnson went further than any other Prime Minister in trying to fix the problem, but the resistance resistance and hostility that he faced could convince another generation of Prime Ministers to do nothing, which would leave councils £8 billion short by 2033, according to Health Foundation figures. This council has taken matters into its own hands in recent years, with a raft of initiatives designed to maximise independence for people with social care needs and to enable them to live at home for longer. It's what most care users want, and it makes public money go further, which means we can help more people. The same principle, making every penny of public money go further, has underpinned other savings and in-year pressure mitigations across our cabinet portfolios, such as service efficiencies across the Chief Executive's department, completing the conversion of halogen streetlights to energy-efficient LEDs, continuing our office rationalisation programme, moving towards paperless ICT-driven working methods, vacancy control, limiting agency uses as much as we can, removing remaining legacy costs of care provided during the COVID pandemic, and employing a brokerage team to ensure that quality care is provided in the most cost-effective way. Despite these efforts, new pressures still emerge. For example, the increase in the national living wage to £11.44, whilst welcome from April 24, was greater than anticipated in our previous medium-term financial strategy. We will of course honour this increase, but the net cost of this new national living wage commitment is significant. It's an extra £19.3 million in the coming financial year alone. In my view, when the Chancellor announces an increase like this and claims credit for it, which he did, then the Treasury should bear more of the cost burden centrally rather than offloading it onto local taxpayers. The government's recent £7.3 million cash boost makes some inroads into that, but too often councils are being handed extra responsibility and costs from the centre without the appropriate amount of funding to match. When the local government settlement was announced with the words "a funding package worth over £64 billion to support councils in England to deliver frontline services," let's remember that 56% of the said £64 billion will be funded through increased local council tax and locally raised adult social care precept. And in fact, 75% of Nottinghamshire's share of the net budget requirement is raised locally. It follows that my gratitude for this vital contribution to our services goes to taxpayers, and especially to local taxpayers, rather than chancellors, ministers or civil servants. The public provide the money for public services. Politicians and public officials simply move it around. In the process of moving money around, government is providing some stability for council by maintaining its approach to various grants, such as continuing to increase the revenue support grant in line with the Consumer Price Index, which brings in £8.6 million to this council. But even before the announcement of an additional £7.3 million last month, the government had already confirmed £65.1 million social care grant allocation to Nottinghamshire for the coming year. And we're receiving new homes bonus grant allocation of £1 million and a services grant of £700,000. Councillor Perdue-Horan last month attempted some smoke and mirrors by highlighting the fall in the services grant since 21-22, but conveniently forgot to acknowledge that various increase on new grants announced in the same time period that I'm proposing today represent £47 million increase in spending, which is certainly not cut compared with 23-24. That would not be possible if Councillor Perdue-Horan's crude give with one hand take with the other claim was actually true. And don't forget that are government funding streams that aren't a direct part of the council's budget but still benefit our county, like the £1.1 billion announced last October for 55 towns, including Coakley and Ashfield, Mansfield, Newark and Worksop. Last year, Councillor Pooh Horan focused his criticism on the interminable wait for fair funding first promised in 2016, and perhaps he should have stuck with that line because there's some common ground on which we can both agree. What we do have from the government is new funding. Is a new funding simplification doctrine, aiming for a simpler and more streamlined funding landscape, and promising, as promised in the Levelling Up White Paper. We agree with that principle, reducing administrative burdens and delivering money to the front line where it's needed. We need to see what the doctrine involves, initially for the 10 councils that have been invited to participate, but then for all of us. In our fresh budget strategy for 2024-25 and beyond, we're proposing further demand management, investor-save income raising and efficiency measures. These will ease pressures on our budget by 16.3 million, enabling us to secure statutory services, maintaining several non-statutory services, balancing our budget for the next 2 years and reducing the budget challenge over the long term back down to 36 million, a manageable figure compared with councils elsewhere. In adult social care, we build on maximising independence approaches by further increasing the use of technology, and we'll also work more closely with our health partners on strategies to reduce the number of avoidable hospital admissions and to reduce the number of high-cost nursing and residential care placements and home care placements. Both these ambitious projects continue the win-win approach that we pursued in recent years, using every resource at our disposal, expert staff and technology, to keep people at the earliest possible stage and thereby prevent them reaching a point when they need more intensive and expensive support. The way we reduce the cost pressures we face is to manage demand, and the way to manage demand is early and targeted intervention. I described in our whole family safeguarding project earlier, but to take this to another level, we'll be investing an extra £1 million to expand our safeguarding support team with a particular focus on tackling drug and alcohol abuse and domestic violence. The money will come from the public health budget, which across England rose by 3.3% last March, part of a 2-year settlement. A further 1.3% cash uplift will take total public health funding nationally to 3.58 billion in 24-25, from which this council receives a ring-fenced £45.5 million share. I'm grateful to our new cabinet member for communities and public health, Councillor Scott Carlton, not only for agreeing this £1 million investment, but for committing to work with the cabinet colleagues to deliver great outcomes for yet more families, in turn bringing demand management and pressure mitigation's benefits for both our children's and adult service budgets. In tandem with this investment of focusing on children particularly, we will continue with the rollout of family hubs at locations across Nottinghamshire designed to provide a one-stop shop of joined-up local support services targeted especially at the most vulnerable parents and children. And as we work to direct as much money as possible into our critical services targeted at vulnerable children and adults, we'll make sure that we'll make the most of our opportunities to raise revenue and to lever in grant funding from our work in other service areas. There's growing demand for the specialist expertise and experience that we possess in services like trading standards, registration, emergency planning and economic development, so it makes sense for such services to become even more self-sustaining, ideally net contributors to our budgets, meaning that we can reinvest in doing more of the same for the benefit of residents, businesses and council partners. In the Great Nottinghamshire Outdoors, we continue to pursue investor-save opportunities in our country parks and to realise any cost reduction opportunities that arise through our contracts with operating partners. The County Council runs a network of centres delivering curriculum-linked outdoor learning opportunities for young people, and from April this year there will be a community-focused adventures project at the Mill Adventure Base. Thanks to a £2 million capital investment, we'll be seeking to make the most of this investor-save opportunity, looking potentially to repeat the success that we've had working with contract partners at our country parks. We want to make outdoor education centres increasingly self-sustaining and independent while ensuring that they contribute effectively to our targeted early intervention strategy, prioritising support and activities for the most vulnerable children. A thread running through this budget and all of our budgets in recent years has been to ensure the facilities and land that this council owns are ideally matched to the services that we provide, located where they are most needed. That's the combined focus of the office rationalisation and the smarter working programmes. The success of smarter working to date and the promise of more in the future will allow our Cabinet Member for Economic Development and Asset Management to continue reducing the cost of our estate, repurposing or selling premises, and funding our capital programme from capital receipts. By generating money this way, rather than by borrowing it, we've reduced our borrowing costs and benefit from current high interest levels while this money is in the bank. This places us in a much more secure position than certain councils whose capital financing costs leave them far more exposed. Within the capital programme, Chairman, our office rationalisation programme has seen us not just selling buildings but constructing new ones. Indeed, our work has started on the new state-of-the-art council offices near Hucknall, which will be energy efficient, green, and will save more than £50 million in maintenance and refurbishment by virtue of being able to leave County Hall and opening up new options for us and for its future use. We built new replacement schools for Hawthorne Primary in Bestwood, Orchard Special School in Newark, Hucknall Flying High Academy, Rosecliff Spencer Academy in Walton, Chapel Lane Primary in Bingham, and the Millside Spencer Academy in Eastleigh. The Getting Access Road, Colliery Way, has fulfilled a long-term ambition to provide a bypass around Gedling Village, and our latest £10.4 million investment in the A614697 improvement scheme will see work begin soon on this vital route through the heart of our county, delivering upgrades to Wallerton Roundabout, White Post Roundabout, Warren Hill Junction, Loudon Roundabout and Kirk Hill Junction. Looking forward, Chairman, the Council estimated school's capital maintenance grant of £4.5 million to further benefit the school building improvement programme over the next 4 years. The new £11.2 million Gateford Primary School is being delivered in Worksop to serve the Gateford Park development, due to open this September, providing a capacity for 350 primary places and 26 nursery places. A £10.4 million major expansion project is currently underway at Outwood Academy, Portland. Also in Worksop, making space for 300 more secondary school places from this September, and we've continued to use our own resources to lever in external funding to support the delivery of flood risk management projects, which sadly seems to have been growing in necessity in recent years. As reported to the Overview Committee recently, the amount we set aside in our reserve strategy to manage flood risk is therefore being increased from 1 to 1.5 million. And of course, there's a biggie: road maintenance renewals. Improving the condition of our highway continues to be a priority for this council, and we deliver the recommendations of our highway improvement plan. Looking forward to next year, as set out in the budget report today, the administration also proposes to invest a further £4 million in highways over and above contract inflation to improve the conditions of roads across our country. The council has spent £189.2 million on its road maintenance and renewals programme over the last 8 years, an extra £31 million of which was funded from the council's own resources, alongside capital grants received from government, thanks to lobbying not least by Councillor Bradley and by Councillor Clark. Recent examples of an extra £3.3 million of capital funding announced by government last March, and a further £4.7 million of funding for this year announced late last year. And we're optimistic that when the new mayor for the East Midlands is elected later this year, with the £1.5 billion transport budget at their disposal, some of the revenue we currently spend on discretionary transport related services will instead be released by him for use on our roads. For example, we will still make a £4 million commitment each year to subsidise the key local bus services, discretionary spend long since cut from budgets of many other councils. And we proudly led the way on demand responsive transport, not bus on demand, invested £5 million in new services for Nottinghamshire. Combined with the pressures on home to school and SEND transport that I described earlier, the hope has to be that the East Midlands Combined Authority will take over most of the responsibility for funding transport provisions such as this, given the £1.5 billion budget that they will command and the economics of scale that can be achieved by negotiating contracts regionally. Chairman, I'm confident that with the right choice of mayor, this will be the case, and that money within this council budget will be released to address the highways and social care pressures that we face. Chairman, I mentioned earlier our Rising to the Challenge budget survey, which this year was completed by 3,911 respondents, an increase of 59% on the 2,500 responses received last year, and was much higher than comparable budget consultations conducted in recent years, which had not exceeded 1,400 responses. From those responses, perhaps the most surprising outcome was that well over half, 63%, supported an increase in council tax, with only 33% opposing such an increase.
Councillor Jackson, there's 1 minute left.
1 minute, thank you, Chairman. This suggests that, to me, residents recognise that the importance of the services we provide and the difficulty of financial challenges that we face. 44% support council tax increases, and we should increase it to the referendum limit. 19% favoured a lower council tax increase. Being Conservatives, we have not recommending today a maximum council tax increase. We refuse to take a single penny more from taxpayers than we believe we need to balance the budgets and to continue delivering quality services. We do, however, propose to increase adult social care levy by 2%, recognising the fact that 48% of respondents supported this. Overall, we are proposing the lowest combined council tax and adult social care precept in the country for a comparable two-tier authority. We're doing so whilst increasing spending on services by 47 million in the coming year and doing it sustainably. Conservative-controlled Nottinghamshire County Council Chairman is protecting services, investing in communities and delivering better value for money for local people. And I'm
Thank you very much, Councillor Jackson.
7 seconds. 7 seconds over my 30.
It's a good job you cut out a couple of terms.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. The Chairman calls Councillor Bradley.
It's important. Councils in England are facing a £3.7 billion additional cost compared with 2021. So let that sink in. £3.7 billion in 2.5-3 years that councils need to find. That comes to us in the form of things like fostering agency placements and looked after children, catering, food costs, salary inflation, home to school transport, SEND transport. Budgets have gone up, just as they have consistently ever since I've been in this building. But in the light of that figure, 3.7 billion extra in 3 years from rising costs and rising demand, all councils are under huge pressure. All councils are under huge pressure, but only a handful have gone bust. And in every circumstance, that's because there's some obvious local smoking gun. Robin Hood Energy in Nottingham, Equal Pay in Birmingham, dodgy investments in Thurrock. That means they've frittered away their local resilience, their flexibility. They're now unable to manage the pressures. As Councillor Jackson pointed out, if you listen to opposition members' plans over recent years and the constant calls to spend reserves, we'd be in that boat. We'd be having commissioners coming in, cutting everything back to the bone. Unfortunately, Conservative administrations here over the last 7 years have made better decisions, have planned for the future, and here we are today as one of Britain's most stable and most resilient local authorities. There's a cautionary tale in the city about what happens when you don't take the decisions, you don't live within your means. As Richard said, whatever some councils might try to tell you, a budget gap of 171 million is 5 times greater than ours. It's not manageable or sustainable, and particularly galling when you consider that list that's floating around social media of 150 million of waste and illegal spending that's occurred in recent years. Puts that budget gap into perspective, doesn't it? But ultimately, it's always residents that pay the price as services disappear, and they're now talking about even a 15% tax rise in the city. But here we've made better decisions. We've taken responsibility where others play at politics. We've put this organisation in a position to manage these pressures. We haven't squandered reserves, as opposition groups would have had us do. We've focused on making our services more sustainable. We continue to deliver the key things residents would expect with taxpayers' money. We're focusing on prioritising key services for the most vulnerable, continuing our ambition to transform services, making them more sustainable for the future with early help and prevention a key theme throughout. We aim to work more closely with our communities, with local groups and councils to get better value, reduce duplication, build resilience. And we'll focus our resources on the communities and the services that need them the most. And by doing this, we've ensured residents will have no need to worry about any cuts to frontline services this year, that the tax position in this council is the lowest tax rise of any equivalent county authority in England, and that we're able to continue to invest in our capital programme of work, like new schools, SEND school places, the A614 improvements that start in a few months' time. We know, and as Councillor Jackson said, that wider reforms are needed to make things work long term, because we know local government isn't sustainable as it stands. We continue to make that case to government. But in that context, with those pressures and those outcomes, despite the challenges, I want to say a huge thank you to Conservative colleagues in the group, to members who've taken part in the scrutiny process, to members of the Cabinet and all the officers and staff who have been involved in what has been a tough job. to bring us into the end of this financial year under budget within just a fraction of a percent of our £1.2 billion budget, despite the pressures. And in this budget setting process for next year, can I say a huge thank you, because this bit of work, the process improves every year. When you look around at our neighbours and equivalent councils and challenges in the sector, you've done a great job here in getting us to this position where we can continue to support residents and offer them increasing value for money. On the wider issue of funding, we've all in this room argued for a long time we need more support. I remember a recent full council meeting, members of opposition said clearly we weren't very influential in this room, nobody was listening because of the local government settlement. I seem to remember saying at the time that the deal wasn't done yet, and we've since benefited from a further £7.3 million investment for Nottinghamshire's core services, campaigning in Parliament with colleagues with the CCN, where Nottinghamshire has led the charge and secured funding for the whole sector. That's made a real difference, and it goes to show that we continue to have a unique opportunity and a unique influence in Whitehall to help us to deliver. It also means that we've been able to invest more money in our roads in this budget. I want to dwell a little bit on roads because it's an area we all know needs a lot of work. It's something we know the current state of our roads isn't good. We know it's a massive priority for our residents, and that's why we're lobbying for additional resources with some success. Extra funding from government for next year already, just over £2 million, with a long-term road settlement that will see an extra £13 million pounds come our way next year, which is really significant. In the meantime, though, we can't wait. We need to invest now, and it's a huge priority for this council. That's why this week I've written to the Chancellor and the Transport Secretary asking them to use their spring budget in a few weeks' time to bring forward some of that road money. So it's not next year, it's now. That's also why we announced when our budget papers were published last week an additional £4 million uplift that will allow us to deliver an additional capital investment this summer of resurfacing and major improvements over and above our normal capital programme. And that full programme will be announced in a few weeks. We have to set the budget first today before we can do that. So there's one reason to vote for this budget today. However, we are able to announce today some of the additional projects, some of the extra major projects we're going to deliver using that additional £4 million. These are major resurfacing projects of busy main roads among the most in need of repair, according to VIA's data. Bit of a teaser because Councillor Clark's going to tell you what they are in a bit. But if there's anything new to talk about today, amongst all the well-rehearsed things we've seen in the papers over the last week and the well-rehearsed debate we're about to have for the next 7 or 8 hours, so we're delivering another major funding boost to do some proper resurfacing work on major roads, and Councillor Clark will tell you more about that later. We've got one amendment to our budget today, Mr Chairman, only one because of ever, from what I can gather from the media, Labour intend to oppose everything today but offer no alternative plan whatsoever, which rings a bell, doesn't it? We're used to that by now, but we do have one. In credit to the Ashfield Independents, they've made an effort. As I said, we're investing over £6 million now in total for this summer's resurfacing works, over £2 million extra from government, and an investment today of £4 million. Of course, we've discussed here a lot. We've got a further opportunity in May with a £1.5 billion transport fund to make more funding available across the region for our transport infrastructure. I may as well speak to that amendment as it's been trailed in the papers already. It's based on flawed principles, the same flawed principles that they roll out at every budget meeting that they used to run Ashfield District Council. They want us to abandon long-term investments, abandon plans to create great opportunities for jobs and homes for future generations in order to cash out now and spend some money. As I've already said, Mr Chairman, if we'd followed that advice at previous budgets, we'd be bankrupt now, or debted up to our eyeballs like Ashfield District Council are. Councillor Girling will explain a little bit more about why their plans to sell land at Totem will end up being a massive loss to Nottinghamshire taxpayers, with the independence maths not traditionally being a strong point when it comes to land valuation either. But abandoning long-term plans, as they suggest, in favour of spending more now than we can afford, is exactly what.
Let's listen to what he's got to say anyway, and then you can
down the rabbit hole that they've now found themselves in. It's exactly what would blow up Ashfield District Council one day, any time, Dave.
Can you excuse me, Councillor Martin? Can you be quiet?
I'll pause my timer then, Dave, while you rant. Go on. Stand up. Stand up. Stand up.
Point of order, Mr Chairman, but what Councillor Bradley is saying about Ashfield District Council's finances is utter crap.
Continue, Councillor Bradley.
What I've said about Ashfield District Council's finances is a matter of public record. It's exactly
not a matter of public record at all.
Excuse me, you've had your say, Councillor Martin.
There's no standards. Point of order. Point of order. It's utter
point
crap.
of order.
Point of order, Mr Chairman. Utter crap.
Can you let the seconder continue? You've got your opportunity to come back. Okay? Point of order.
Chairman, The Local Government Association, run at the time by Conservatives, stated that Ashfield's finances were well managed, and I have to tell this chamber that my chief executive at Ashfield has had to be in touch with the chief executive here to report Councillor Bradley for continually to mislead this chamber. The finances of Ashfield are not in the state he discusses. In fact, they are the best in this county, and he needs to retract it. He needs to retract it. And you know, you run nothing. You're an incompetent child. Mr. Chairman, the Chief Executive will clarify that Teresa Hodgkinson has had to make public statements to undo Mr. Bradley's lies.
Well, we're not going to discuss that. You had your point of order, councillors.
No, we're not here to discuss that. We're not here to discuss that. So why does he keep bringing it up?
Point of clarification, Chairman.
The same lie every time.
Can you sit down?
Why does he keep having the same lie?
Can you sit down and we can continue, Councillor
Point of
Martin?
clarification, Mr. Chairman. Point of clarification. We are
Councillor
here.
Carr, what is your point of clarification?
Are we not here to discuss the budget?
You're here to discuss the budget when the seconders completed. Yeah.
Thank you. Are we not here to discuss the budget of this council and not the budget of Ashfield, not the budget of Nottingham City Council? Thank you.
Carr. Councillor Bradley, would you like to continue? Seconded.
Resume your utter crap.
We've never got anything nice to say, Mr. Chairman, because they've run out of legitimate arguments. The truth is, and members opposite know this, we can have both major new road investment and the growth, jobs and opportunities that the land at Houghton creates for local residents in our county. They know this, but it doesn't write a very good headline, does it, Mr. Chairman? Because they don't want a headline that says anything that's true. They want a headline where they can pretend it's a binary choice and we've voted against road investment, when in reality, we're announcing massive new roads investment here today. And when in reality, the combined authority will have a £300 million a year budget in May to invest further in our roads as well. At least they're coming here with something to say, Mr. Chairman, in fairness. Better that than to complain about everything. Spend the afternoon criticising but present no plan, no alternative arguments or ideas. What is the point, Mr. Chairman? What is the point in the Labour group in this context? Who do they represent by making no offering at all here today? They've had weeks with all the financial data, weeks more than last year, and have come up with absolutely nothing. What a sad state of affairs if they just plan to say no to anything and present no plan of their own. We're in a decent place here as an authority. Despite the pressures, we continue to protect our frontline services. We continue to have some of the county's best funded youth services, library services, the country's best funded. We continue to protect children's centres, and in fact we're going to expand their remit, delivering family hubs and offering more prevention and support services in those areas that need it the most. We're delivering our capital programme of investment, new schools, new send places, A614 plans kicking off very soon, a new youth centre in Mansfield. We are delivering. While sadly tax rises are inevitable in the circumstances we've described, we have the lowest tax rise of any equivalent county council in England. We're investing £47 million more in our services next year, supporting residents to be well, to be independent, to get around, to have fulfilling lives. £47 million more next year than we do now. And we have further opportunities coming our way this year, as Nottinghamshire will step into that new combined authority and the £4 billion of new investment that it brings, and work with our partners and stakeholders to do more still. We'll work on shared plans and priorities to draw in new investment. We will help improve public transport. We will deliver, with the right mayor, major new roads funding. We will help get all of our stakeholders and services together to kick off a big booming investment and opportunities for our region. Step Fusion is perhaps the flagship of all of that, a long-term project that will bring in billions and that will offer kids who are in school today the kinds of training and the kinds of opportunities and careers that will really take them places. Whilst many councils, some even next door, are looking over a cliff, we're looking ahead to something really positive. What an exciting time to be involved in these things, in business, in transport, in education in Nottinghamshire, with all of these things coming our way. Thanks, Richard. So, Mr. Chairman, I commend this budget to you today because it continues to deliver our long-term, our 10-year plan to make our services more sustainable. Far from cuts of any kind, it adds additional investment to Nottinghamshire's public services. We're making our savings by reducing our bills, being more efficient, transforming our services to make them more effective. We're announcing major new investment in our roads over and above the normal capital programme. We continue to improve value for money we offer for residents. And Nottinghamshire is one of Britain's best run, most stable and sustainable authorities. I hope everyone will support this budget today.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. The motion has been moved and seconded. We now move to the amendment. The chairman calls on Councillor Zadrozny to move the Independent Alliance amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In moving our formal budget amendment for 24-25, I want to thank our officers and staff team at the Independent Alliance for their hard work and diligence in putting together our alternative. It is the only alternative put before you today. Mr. Chairman, on the 17th of January 1967, the Daily Mail ran a story about the sorry state of roads in a town in northwest England. Not the biggest story of the day, and it would have certainly been forgotten quickly if one Mail reader, a certain John Lennon, hadn't seen it, put in a famous song and asphalted it into the consciousness of a generation. It was the final track on the album of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club, and it's often cited as the best song of all time. I read the news today, oh boy, 4,000 holes in Blackburn, Lancashire. And though the holes were rather small, they had to count them all. And now we know how many holes it takes to fill the Albert Hall. I often think, Mr. Chairman, what would this sound like if John Lennon had read the Nottingham Post all these decades later? I read the news today, oh Ben, 10,000 holes in Nottinghamshire. And though the holes were rather small, your broken promises won't fix them at all. They say the Beatles wrote enduring songs, but not many people know that one of their most famous songs was about potholes. Chairman, today's debate will be dominated by the parlous state of Nottingshire's broken roads and pavements. But before I go into the budget as a whole, I wanted to summarise the impact of the independent amendment. As councillors will attest, dealing with the diabolical state of our broken roads and pavements is the number one priority for our residents. The independent team and I knock on thousands of doors every week, and it's the first thing residents tell you. Residents are incandescent with rage, and rightly so. They tell us they want to see real investment in our crumbling highways. Across every corner of our county, we see a trail of Conservative failure, dangerous potholes strewn across every highway. What the independent amendment does, Mr. Chairman, is to finally deal with the single biggest issue that residents are asking us to sort out. Independents are proposing a variation to the capital programme to increase the road maintenance programme by £10 million in each of 24-25 and 25-26, funded from the capital receipt from the disposal of unused land at Towton. The land was purchased in and around Towton in 1920 for future development in conjunction with the proposed HS2 rail route. It cost taxpayers £22.3 million. They want their money back. This council then wasted £200,000 on external consultants, and we queried this at the time. It was okay, the county council said. Boris has promised it. But as we all know, HS2 in the East Midlands went the way of the 40 new hospitals and the writing off of the PFI debt at Kingsmill Hospital, also promised by Bojo. It was another broken promise, just like his pensions justice for ex-miners. This purchase was in anticipation of the HS2B Eastern leg to Towton. This was to, and I quote from the documents published in a policy committee paper, to take maximum economic advantage of HS2 stopping at Towton. The problem is, now HS2 has been cancelled, this land is not needed. This is land that Nottinghamshire County Council have no plan for. Don't take my word for it. At the full council meeting just in December, Keith Girling said, "We haven't decided what we are going to do with it yet. We don't know if we're going to sell it. We don't know if we're going to build on it. We don't know what's going to happen to it. So we've taken our steer from Mr. Girling and the Prime Minister, who has said that money left from the cancellation of HS2 should be spent on potholes. Other councils are being told to dispose of the land they've earmarked for HS2. This amendment is simply following government policy." In October, Rishi Sunak said, "For too long, politicians have shied away from taking the right long-term decisions to make life easier for hard-working families, tackling the scourge of potholes being a prime example." Just 2 months after Mr. Girling admitted there was no current plan for the land at Towton, on publication of our budget, a plan worth billions for this land suddenly floats out of the Tory blue sky. People were somewhat surprised to hear this, and I'll tell you why we were surprised. No such plan exists. Ben Bradley is dishonest, Mr. Chairman, and not for the first time. He says there is a plan, but as I've said previously, Mr. Girling stood in this chamber in December and said there isn't. It was in September that Mr.
Point of
Oh,
order, Mr. Chairman.
willfully stop the clock then, please, Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
I want to highlight the East Midlands Development Company website a vision for growth for Toton, which the member could easily have Googled if he wanted to, and perhaps offered some truth in the chamber.
Is Keith getting wrong? Who's right?
Continue, Councillor
Thank you.
Zadrozny.
So it was in September that Mr. Bradley willfully misled this chamber when he claimed that free school meals in London were paid for by the proceeds of ULEZ. Days later, we received a letter from the Deputy Mayor of London saying not only was this a lie, it was also illegal. Yet the administration believed Ben Bradley's false invention, hook, line and sinker. I'm asking Council this morning not to fall for another shoddy lie. Put simply, this budget takes the broken promises of Boris Johnson and uses them to fix our broken roads. Council, you face a clear choice. You either listen to what the public is asking us to do and invest properly in our broken roads and pavements, or sit on derelict land for which this council has no plan, land being strangled from economic regeneration by being locked in the bank coffers of this council. That is Councillor's choice today, Mr. Chairman. And I'll tell you exactly what's happening here. Last week, when our alternative budget was published, there were huge recriminations at County Hall. Publication of the budget was delayed as Ben stomped around County Hall like a petulant toddler. And I can imagine the scene, the panic, the questions to finance officers from the Conservatives. Why the hell didn't you tell us we could do this? And we can do it, Mr. Chairman. Yes, this budget represents a tiny uplift in funding, but it's not enough. Due to our highways being substantially neglected for a generation, Mr. Bradley says 150 million is needed. The reality is that the problems we face with our highways need real action, and now. It states on the covering report of our amendment, in the opinion of the Service Director for Finance, these amendments meet the requirements of the Local Government Finance Act, the Local Government Act, and the CIPFA Prudential Code. Independent councillors have gone further. We've contacted via East Midlands and asked them whether they could spend our extra 10 million each of the next 2 years, and they said yes. They said they could put the extra spades in the ground on day one. So we have the Chief Finance Officer saying that our budget amendment is deliverable. We have the Monitoring Officer saying it's legally compliant. We have via East Midlands saying they can do the repairs. But today, many of you will vote against Independent's plans to deliver on Nottinghamshire people's priorities because your party bosses tell you to vote for their views and not the views of your residents. And frankly, that stings. This council then recently announced a 4 million increase in the roads maintenance renewal programme. But looking at the facts, Mr. Chairman, in 22-23, this council spent 30.2 million on roads maintenance programme. In 24-25, the road maintenance programme totaled 30.6 million, 26.6 from the approved capital programme, plus the further 4 million set out in paragraph 56 of the budget report to Cabinet. And those figures don't include our
Point of order,
amendments.
Chairman.
Point of order accepted, Councillor Gurley.
Sorry for the delay, but I've had to find my answer to the question where I've been misquoted by
You've
Jason.
been quoted exactly.
No, well, I've actually got the answer.
Just tell us what
I've actually got the answer
Point
here,
it, yeah.
Chairman, and it's a matter of public record.
Yes,
So
we took it from the minutes.
no,
Continue, Councillor Gurley. Tell us what this
so,
is.
I mean, it's not a particularly long answer. But it was an answer, and it wasn't saying we've got no plan, we've got no idea.
You have
Which
a voice
quoted
recording
me-
of you saying it.
I'm actually going to tell you what I said. It's in the documents.
It's a voice recording of you speaking.
Well, it's here. It's written.
Never mind written. I've got you saying
Excuse
it.
me.
My point is,
We need to
Chairman,
move on.
if they've had a go at Ben saying he lied about their accounts, that's a lie. This is the answer. It's a matter of
Yeah, you've made your point of order, Councillor Gurlin.
And that's it. I've done.
Councillor Zadrozny, can you continue?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We don't have deep fakes in this council. We've got the voice recording. Mr. Chairman, what this means in this budget, you have cut the funding for roads maintenance programme by 3.6 million, then announced an extra 4 million. Talk about smoke and mirrors. I won't be surprised if Debbie McGee comes rolling out to help you with your next trick. The reality is, in your budget, you have only increased spending on highways by 400,000, not 4 million. It's a shameful charade of shifty chicanery and subterfuge. But, Mr. Chairman, I won't be joining calls this morning for Mr. Clark to be stripped of his MBE like Paula Venables. As my colleague says, this is a distraction and a matter for his own conscience. Council, let's look at the land around Toton in more detail. Mr. Bradley states that this will, and I quote, cost Nottinghamshire taxpayers billions in growth. His comments are inane, imperceptive, unintelligent and obtuse. What the sale of this land actually does is rapidly kickstart regeneration in the Toton area. Let's revisit Mr. Girling's comments. He said in December, there was no plan. Put simply, he didn't know what they were going to do with it. Or do they? Because, Mr. Chairman, a whistleblower has come forward stating that this council has been talking to developers about selling the land and has even begun contractual discussions with land agents to facilitate the sale. Ben's plans seem to have bypassed Mr. Girling's. Mr. Chairman, after the cancellation of HS2, this council had the land valued at 23 million. It had already lost 5.7 million of its value. So who do we really think is better placed to develop this land? Nottinghamshire County Council or the free market and corporate experts? Because based on this council's track record, I think we know the answer and it's not you. In July, the leader of this council wrote a letter to government with the leader of Leeds City Council demanding HS2. Following its publication, Ben said HS2 is more than a railway line. It's fundamental to our vision for levelling up communities throughout this country. Now it's been scrapped, he's changed his mind, flipping around like he did with Brexit. But as a result of the scrapping of HS2 in the Midlands, our residents will be poorer. It's a good job, Councillor Jackson, that we had an MP as the council's leader, isn't it? Who could rattle the doors of Westminster, change government policy. Already the government has handed over 255 million of money scrapped by HS2 to fix roads in London. Mr. Chairman, figures revealed by my independent colleagues show that Nottinghamshire County Council has lost close to 1 billion in direct funding from government in just 10 years. Their own figures reveal that in 13-14 the council received a revenue support grant of 99.9 million. This year we are set to get 8.1 million. That means over 10 years the council has lost £920 million in direct funding to Nottinghamshire. When my excellent colleague and the future cabinet member for finance at this council, Councillor Francis Purdue-Horan, used the figures in last month's overview committee, Conservative councillors claimed not to recognise the figures, but this is despite those figures being provided by the senior staff members at the finance team. The cumulative amount of money that Nottinghamshire County Council has lost over a decade is eye-watering. If they'd received the same amount in annual grant funding as 10 years ago, we would have been better off by close to 1 billion. Imagine if that money was actually used to fix our broken roads and pavements, let alone vital, struggling public services. This is one of the main reasons today you are proposing yet another astronomical council tax rise, pickpocketing residents yet again because of Conservative government cuts and Conservative councillors' financial ineptitude. Last month, I told the media, if you ever wondered why the pothole outside your house has been fixed on the cheap, this is the reason. The Conservative government has systematically underfunded councils for 14 years, and any new funding will not even touch the sides of the close to 1 billion cuts. Also contained within these papers is this year's services grant, which has been reduced by 84% compared to last year. This represents a £3.5 million reduction in year, and is over £6 million than when it was first introduced in 2021. The reduction in the services grant virtually wipes out any extra money expected to be received through the social care grant. Let's look at that. Mr. Bradley and a number of the councillors write a letter on Monday, and by Wednesday the government announced an extra 600 million. I mean, call me cynical, but that doesn't ring true. And that's because civil servants have told us it was always the plan. So why wasn't it in the autumn statement? It sounds like your plan for Toton, doesn't it? Written on the back of a fag packet, a political stunt aimed at shoring up the fag end of a Tory government. Since 2019, there have been 4 votes in Parliament on increasing local government support from national government, and Mr. Bradley has voted against twice and not even bothered to turn up to the other 2. Shameful. If Ben's letter had worked, then why hadn't he written more? We're told in this chamber that writing letters to government is a waste of time. Yet just before a mayoral election that Ben knows he's going to lose, this change of heart is, cynical to say the least. The decimation of the services grant means we won't gain a penny, in fact we lose, and when we lose, our residents lose. And what of Labour, Mr. Chairman? A lot's been said about their lack of budget, and I get why they didn't put an alternative budget in. They're playing safe. If Labour were in a game of bullseye, they would have taken the bus fare home before they had a chance to win a small boat. They offer no alternative, and make no mistake, members, voting against our proposals will mean 20 million less on roads and pavements, and the public will remember you cozied up to the Tories. Yet again, it's the independent opposition who provide an alternative, just as it always is. Mr. Chairman, despite repeated requests, we still have no new figures on the cost of the new building at Top Wigan. This will cost taxpayers close to 30 million, but that's okay, you tell us, because you're flogged County Hall. But instead, we've been attacked for selling the family silver over derelict land at Towton. This is the family silver, Mr. Chairman. Who knows, on this very spot I'm standing, this could be the next Hooters. Yet you tell us you wanted to flog derelict land at Towton. We're selling the family silver. I mean, do you know how ludicrous and fatuous you sound? Family silver bought in 2019 based on a broken promise is senseless drivel. It's yet another grubby parlour trick from a cheap charlatan. And do you know who I feel sorry for? The people of Towton, the people of Broxtowe, and the people of Nottinghamshire. They've been lied to by the leader of this county council continually, and they've been shortchanged and failed by the Tories. And I also feel sorry for Conservative councillors on this council, but rather than doing their own research, they are fed a pack of lies and instructed to follow the party line. Good, honest councillors like Sue and John, sacked by a snake oil salesman and now expected to vote against investing 20 million in road repairs. It's an appalling lack of respect they've been shown. This morning, Mr. Chairman, this council should be thanking the independent opposition for listening to and finding a real way to deliver on people's priorities, but instead you play politics. You can't stand the idea of people, the independent group, being in touch with the people's priorities, and Nottinghamshire is a poorer place for your betrayal of our residents. At the start of my speech, Mr. Chairman, I mentioned A Day in the Life, the John Lennon classic. A day in the life of a county councillor involves dozens of complaints about potholes, dozens of complaints about broken roads and pavements, and complaints about this council's expensively assembled group of lawyers turning down compensation claims. Residents deserve better. At a time when you're putting council tax up for the 8th year in a row, people want you to listen and to act on their priorities, and that is exactly what the independent, sensible amendment does. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I commend this alternative budget to the council.
Mr. Chairman, can I just seek a point of personal clarification? We were told in the minutes that by Councillor Girling that his speech was something that he just misclaimed, but in the audio minutes by the council, I think it makes very clear.
Yeah, we haven't decided what we're going to do with it yet. We don't know if we're going to sell it, we're going to build on it,
Right.
what's going to happen to it, so it won't be the right time to spend money.
He doesn't know what he's going to do with it yet, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Zadlowski.
The council's audio minutes.
Would you like to second that?
I think we had a point of order from Councillor Fowler.
Councillor Foles, sorry.
I'm not quite sure which point it is, but I think the shouting and bad language and aggression in this chamber is appalling. What will our residents be thinking if they're watching this? They want to hear a respectful and considered debate, not bad language and kind of aggression. It's appalling.
Thank you for your contribution. Councillor Foles. Councillor Perdue Horan, will you second the motion, the amendment?
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to second the amendment to the motion and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Perdue Horan. Councillor Jackson, do you accept the amendment?
Chairman, no, we don't. I am grateful that the independent group actually bothered to put an amendment in. I'm grateful that they accept 100% of our revenue budget, including council tax increases and spending commitments right across the services that we provide. None of those services they talked about one issue that we're investing an extra £6 million in next year. The key point about the land at Towton, I know because it's in my division, is we bought it specifically because we wanted to maximise the value to residents that we'd get out of that land. That's not about a financial return in the short term, that's about driving jobs, quality jobs and employment onto that site and ensuring we get a quality development of that site in tandem with development right around the area. Now that wasn't always in
So you need to come back and look at it.
well, he knows the point because we've had it in the press anyway. I'm sure he's read it. We're certainly not accepting.
Right, we have a single debate now on the motion and the amendment, and I will now open the debate. So, have we any speakers? Did Jim want? Councillor Creamer, you asked.
Thank you, Chairman. We've been spoken about, so we might as well hear what we have to say for ourselves.
And thanks for actually moving the budget as well. Anyway, but I couldn't quite make out on your movement exactly where you were coming from. You explained quite rightly about how badly the East Midlands was treated, how Nottinghamshire was treated itself, and over the years, and it's still not been treated well. And then you went on to laud the leader for all the money he's brought in. So I can't quite balance which way you've actually come from. It doesn't seem to balance, which is pretty well what this budget is. So the budget not for the first to be delivered in uncertain economic times. Last year, we had the budget set in the wake of Liz Truss's disastrous mini budget, supposedly full of good ideas. If you take the word of the council's lead, Liz Truss crashed the economy, sunk the pound, and her mini budget was a total disaster. And they were the good points, I suppose. A disaster that has cost many Nottinghamshire residents hundreds of pounds extra from that day to this and carrying on. In mortgage payments, which I'm sure will be thankful in the upcoming elections. So what's changed on this one? Well, this year, despite the Coons telling us they have a very cunning plan, and I like Baldwin as much as anybody else, but he never really came up with a good plan. So far, that plan seems to be driving the economy backwards into recession. As a consequence, this council budget is set in full expectation that we're bracing ourselves for a spring budget with more unfunded, electioneering tax cuts. One-offs, continuously basing one-offs, which will no doubt need another wave of austerity and further cuts to front lines to pay for them. Actually, I'm rather surprised this wasn't mentioned by the Cabinet member when moving the budget proposal. He did. He mentioned bits and bobs of we have other funding about to let it right coming in. And that is no way to run a budget or a council. Because it's plainly obvious that members on this side have said that
It's on. It's on.
it's on.
It's on.
Ah, got it. If I'll face the chair, I think it's probably better. You can hear me now. Because plainly obvious to the members on this side of the chamber that this is the situation we find ourselves. Very clear to the residents of Nottinghamshire. Now, on the budget put before. Are you still here?
Yeah, use this.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, on the YouTube, it'll be your face appearing. I'm sorry about that. Which is better.
It wasn't on.
It was on. It was on. Right. Oh, nothing but trouble today, isn't it? Right. Now, the budget before today, the headline of this budget, I start. Sound Economic Times councils will be closing the budget gap, but not this year. This concerned budget shows the deficit has grown over 10% from 31.7 million to 36 million pounds. So actually, not a good position to be in. In times of growth, we would expect more funding available to not just balance the lines on the budget, but to deliver all the services that Nottinghamshire residents really need. This isn't the picture being painted by this budget. Yes, the budget will let the current administration live to fight another day, but that day is coming in a not too distant future, kicking things down the road. It's coming up in the form of the required savings this council will need to make predominantly by the next administration after 2025. Mr. Chairman, the figure for required savings in the period 2027 last year was £14.7 million. That has now more than doubled to over £30 million. The Cabinet member wants to present himself by taking difficult decisions today. He wouldn't. But anyone can see that from the budget that difficult decisions have merely been pushed back, kicked down the road. No doubt because he believes that after the county council elections next year, it will be a Labour administration who will have to pick up the pieces of a shambolic running of the economy and 14 years of austerity and contempt for local government under the Conservatives, nationally and locally. Actually, on service cuts, you've told residents and in your movements, right, you've told the press that the budget won't deliver any service cuts. Appendix B tells a very different story. £16.3 million worth of cuts right across the council. Some of the type of wolf in sheep's clothing that we've come to expect over the years, smoke and mirrors, but say where you like the £8.4 million of cuts to adult social care budgets. But some are a bit more obvious, of the £445,000 of cost reduction opportunities in our country parks, our culture services, including things like our libraries, is quite concerning. which the seconder actually mentioned about extra funding, but didn't mention the cuts. Of the reserves, Good Economic Times councils are building up the reserves. Reserves are the council's emergency fund for the rainy day. Things you say yourselves, and quite rightly so. Now, I can wait. I've got 10 minutes. It's not a 10-minute speech.
You tell them.
Right, Good Economic Times councils are building up their reserves. Reserves are the council's emergency fund for any day. Now, we all witnessed the damage done to this county by the rain from Storm Babette, and I believe we're now into Storm Kathleen. And for a little light relief, perhaps we should actually name the next storms Storm S&M for Storm Rishi and Storm Sunai. But that'd be a bit milder, I suppose. Because everybody needs evidence that we're fully and truly rained on by this government is their handling of the economy. It's the use of £35 million of reserves in this budget just to make ends meet. Now, that's just to make ends meet. Again, kicking down the roads. There's a little bit of a theme going on here. We've got an amendment on roads. We've got Tories kicking things down the road. I'm concerned about these two reasons. The first is that the pressure this council is going to put under in the coming years to balance its budget through higher and higher capital receipts. These are going to become more and more difficult to achieve in ever increasing buyer's market. And it's already mentioned that to some extent. The amendment actually mentioned that for buyer's market. Costs are going, against us, if you like. What that means for this council, for future administration and for taxpayers, is that we run the serious risk of being shortchanged. Right? So that spells out on page 80 of the papers, where under the heading Interest and Borrowing, it states quite clearly the level of borrowing undertaken by accounts, heavily influenced by the capital programme slippage, can result in reduced borrowing in the year, although this will be incurred at a later date. So again, picking it down around. So there we go. And the level of external borrowing will also increase as the council's level of reserves declines, because the ability to borrow internally reduces. This is all in the budget papers. So there we have it. The Conservatives' own budget. They know that by gambling so much on capital receipts, they are both forcing the council to no doubt accept less than the true value of our assets, mentioned by the amendments as well, and raising the risk of further external borrowing in future years. Now, we'll let my colleagues use their time to provide our views on the impact the budget will actually make within their various services. As Labour's Principal Finance, I can see, as the Cabinet member can see, that this budget is evidence that it counts as a worse financial bill of health than it did a year ago. To deny it would be a dishonest thing to do. We have to be honest with the residents of this county and our electorate. I actually applaud the leader's attempt to raise the alarm a handful of weeks ago regarding the dire straits that frankly all councils due to government cuts, and again today, so thanks for that. But it's sadly a case of too little, too late. The £7 billion to so-called rescue package is less than the amount that the Send Transport has risen in the last year alone. It is a definition of sticking plaster politics, Mr. Chairman, and the sticking plaster seems to have no glue itself. So the Labour group won't be supporting this budget, and we won't be supporting the amendment, because it's frankly not a policy a future Labour administration would advocate. Taking out a payday loan, and that's the issue we have with it. A payday loan to fill a 1 in 20 potholes across the county isn't a sustainable solution, and we do need a sustainable solution. We have seen the Conservatives throw enough good money after bad in failing to fix the potholes, and they believe that only the true alternative budget, the budget will be set after the next election. I'm sure the independents, despite the headline chasing, will actually understand about why we're actually not actually supporting it. We can't support payday loans. We've seen the dangers of that. Mr. Chairman, we have advocated for more to be done to address the chronic underfunding of councils over the last 14 years, and will continue to do so. The budget may be set today, but given the challenge of facing future
Councillor
administration...
Creamer, 30 seconds left.
Pardon? 30 seconds left. Oh, thank you. The work we start now from Lead On advocate for nothing less than the sustainable council funding and no more of the begging bowl culture we have come to expect. It's clear that things are worse than they were a year ago, but to borrow the phrase, things can only get better. It's my hope the next budget will be set in better service under the Labour government in partnership with a Labour East Midlands Mayor and her cabinet. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Creamer. I have no more speakers.
Oh, you do?
Oh,
Yes, you do.
You do. Who was just indicated? Matt. Councillor Barney, would you like to speak?
Thank you very much, Chairman. So it's coming up to 2 years that it's been my privilege to be the portfolio holder for adult social care at Notts County Council. And genuinely and absolutely from my heart, I'd like to express what an incredibly humbling experience that has been to be involved in a juggernaut, to be involved in this amazing thing that takes care of so many people across Nottinghamshire every single day is remarkable. And I know, working with many members in this chamber, seeing your care and your compassion, the very ideals, the very reasons that you've become councillors to help people, getting involved in individual cases of support, reaching out, supporting your residents to get good outcomes in the services that we in the adult social care team provide. And that's incredible, it's remarkable. I have to say, as I came into this role, you know, probably something more of an arrogant man than I am now, I used to think that I'd been involved in some pretty big business and done some pretty big things, managing big budgets. How pathetic was that? How pathetic was I? This incredible system that we have here in adult social care in this county council, which is of course mirrored across our nation, is phenomenal. We have 24,000 residents on a day-to-day basis on average that we're looking after across Nottinghamshire, supported by 6,000 staff, so either directly or indirectly employed, and a budget of around 450 million expenditure. Yeah, this is colossal, but for what purpose? For the most essential of purpose, to look after the most needy and the most vulnerable of people, which is why I hope and believe that the vast majority of us in this chamber get involved in this grubby game in the first place. Now, I just want to take my hat off for a minute and just acknowledge that it's not been easy. It's not been easy in the last 2 years that I've been involved in this department, but going back over several years, we've seen difficulties. We've seen difficulties in rising demands. We've seen rising costs. We've seen inflation. We see staff challenges. We see even now endless flooding affect our ability to run care homes, and our amazing staff working weekends and day and nights rescuing people from care homes as the floods waters rise. And of course a myriad of other problems which we never get to share, and keeping confidentialities with our residents across Nottinghamshire that we can't share. So many issues. And yet day in, day out, we deliver. My team, our staff deliver phenomenally across Nottinghamshire, looking after the residents, our own family members, and the people that we know and love around us. And yet the budget, this massive budget, when I've run my businesses, with tiny little budgets by comparison, it's really difficult to get your budget to meet your year-end target, to get your balance sheet to stack up, to get the numbers to be anywhere near. And yet, remarkably, a budget of £450 million, we come in online. We come in against what we forecast, not just this year, but last year as well. And going back over the several years of this administration. And that credit goes not by accident, it goes to our brilliant, incredible staff, our workforce, who work day in, day out against those ever-rising demands and pressures to achieve this phenomenal result. That means that we can align our budgets and our thinkings to where we place our council tax rates, and our residents can have confidence in the prudence and the economic stability that this council offers. Now, going forward, we've mentioned, Councillor Creamer mentioned £8.4 million worth of cuts. I'd just like to explain that we're not making £8.4 million of cuts. There's this word efficiencies, in which I know you're all going to raise your eyebrows as I say it. We are bringing home efficiencies based on the foundational work, the incredible foundational work that's been done over several years, not by myself, but by our staff and also our colleagues in the ICB and the NHS, looking at transfer of care, looking at how we get people home, out of hospital as quickly as we possibly can, to get the burden off the resources in the hospital, but also to get the best outcomes for those individuals to be best served in the places that they know and love in their homes. And that work is enabling us to go further with these measures. We're going to be able to drive further efficiencies based on the incredible transfer of care hubs and other measures that we're working in so close coalition with our partners across Nottinghamshire to deliver. So that's where one of the efficiencies is going to continue to come. And the other efficiency is based on technologies. We've all heard about the revelations of technology coming, of AI was mentioned this morning, not Ashfield Independence, great joke, I thought there, Richard. But of course, technology can be scary, and for vulnerable people, the word of technology can be scary as well. I know in my own family, my own mother, despite our best attempts to get her to use WhatsApp, she still doesn't even like to use an iPhone. And we are not going to be bringing technological advancements against people. We're not going to be thrusting people in a direction they want to go. But where it works, where it brings benefit, where it brings better quality of care and better security for residents, and empowers and enables them more to stay in the locations they love, surrounded by the people they love in their own homes, that's the right thing to do. And I'm excited, and working closely with Councillor Tom Smith, we're seeing now the bones of the projects that we're going to be bringing forward over the coming months, over the next year, to bring forward further efficiencies in these areas, which also drive up qualities of care and standards and better services for our residents. We've mentioned several times the incredible, and it genuinely is incredible, the work that our leader has done in fighting, not just for this local authority, but other local authorities, and getting the voice of local government heard where it needs to be heard. And I know that's been mocked, but I'm grateful for the benefit being receipt of all of these millions of pounds that keep flowing in this council's direction, and others as well. But it would be remiss not to also mention the work of Melanie in her role with ADAS, our DAS. Incredible work shaping and transforming the good outcomes that we so need and depend upon to be able to continue to deliver excellent services. And so just in closing, I would like to just comment that I've only been doing this role for 2 years, but the fact that we have been able to continue to deliver as we are delivering with prudence, with economic competence, is because of the work that's gone before my time in this role, because of other members on this side of the chamber who, despite the calls from opposition members to spend everything, burn through our COVID reserves, burn through every pot of grant and every last penny that we haven't done that. We've been prudent, and thank God for that, because we're still able to deliver and reassure our residents across Nottinghamshire County that they are in safe hands in this administration's care and love. I'd also just like, as I actually do close, to just absolutely fully endorse Councillor Kate Fall's comments. Come on, let's get the standard up, guys. This isn't Mickey Mouse politics. There's enough horror going on in the world. We've got to raise the standard of politics, not to taking needless lumps out of each other. Grow up.
Thank you, Councillor Barney. We will break for lunch and resume at 1:30.